Whenever I was a child, I remember being really excited for my 20th birthday. 20 just seemed so far away. Adulthood just seemed so far away. And I viewed adulthood to be so much bigger than how I view it now. I remember having an underlying belief that I was going to be more established by the time that I was entering adulthood. What specifically that entailed was beyond the scope of what I could have imagined because I was so young at that time. But I think I just expected to be further along in my life than I am at this point. I don't think I expected to still be depending on people, and I didn't expect to be completely aimless in regards to where I wanted my life to go. I was actually sick in bed a few months ago. During that time, I started to get very lost in thought, and I started to really think about the fact that I was 19 years old. In just a few months, I was never going to be a teenager again. Dwelling on that notion caused me to feel very unsettled. It was unsettling ruminating on the idea that I was never going to be a teenager ever again for the rest of time. But it was also unsettling thinking about being 19 and not really having a lot to show for my life. I always envisioned myself living a very accomplished life at a really young age. And oftentimes I was so caught up basking in that fantasy that I was too scared to realistically evaluate how I was going to cultivate that kind of life for myself. The consequence of that was not being able to exit my teenage years feeling really accomplished, and instead watching these years that are pegged to be the prime years of your life just kind of wither away. Whenever I was a younger teenager, I just remember hating my life. I was sad constantly. I was always drastically worried about something, and I didn't have any clear space that I felt that I could fit into, which caused me to feel misunderstood everywhere that I went. I perceived myself to be miserable, and I found myself being crippled by so much angst and sorrow. And whenever I got older, I started reflecting on that time and really regretting being that way. I realized that continuously wallowing in those negative feelings prevented me from soaking in and enjoying those years. And in the midst of a lot of that perceived anguish, I always thought about what my life would be like when I did grow up and I was on my own. I just imagined myself flourishing. I imagined myself never looking back at where my life was in those early teenage stages. And now I've reached the phase in my life that I fantasized about, and I spend a lot of time missing what life used to be like. And it's wild to even imagine that I'd be saying that, considering how miserable I perceived my life to be. But oftentimes I do miss being a younger teenager. I wish that I would have enjoyed being a younger teenager, and I spend a lot of time regretting not soaking those years in a way that was meaningful to me. All of that regret really slapped me in the face whenever I was a senior in high school. By that point, I'd done some maturing, and I wasn't consumed with the wallowing constantly, the self-pity that I was talking about earlier. Releasing from those old mindsets forced me to be aware of just how much of my life I'd missed out on. Those regretful feelings only started to amplify during college application season. Like a lot of high school seniors, I went down the very long and dark rabbit hole of watching all the college decision reaction videos and all of the videos of people talking about the stats and the resumes that got them into whatever top institution. Watching those videos caused me to be amazed at how much a lot of these young kids had accomplished during their time in high school, but they also caused me to lament on things that I accomplished because I knew that what I had on my resume significantly failed in comparison to a lot of them. And I know that it's never good to fall down the rabbit hole of comparison, but the thoughts that spiraled from watching those videos went beyond feeling as though I wasn't as worthy as people who got into top colleges. I never even really had a goal of getting into a top college for most of the time that I was in high school. To me, it symbolized knowing that I was worthy, yet being unwilling to truly push myself and see that worthiness come into fruition. Of course, different people have different privileges, and there are a lot of people who just don't have access to the same resources as some of the really highly accomplished students. But I also remember seeing some videos of low-income students and students who didn't really come from much and still took the initiative positive despite their situation. And that was the opposite of how I lived my life for the better part of being a teenager. I always remembered being very ambitious, but also succumbing to any minor obstacles. And I just taught myself to be completely helpless about whatever situation I was in, and that culminated in me just being completely lazy and unwilling to do anything that I wanted to. As an older teenager, it was very excruciating thinking about how far along I could have been if I would have taken advantage of the opportunities I had to really explore my potential. They say that you gain a lot of freedom when you become an adult, and I believe that in a lot of ways that is true. But in becoming an adult, I also believe that you lose a lot of freedom as well. One of the freedoms that I believe is lost when you become older is the freedom to fully explore yourself without any guilt or repercussions. When you start to emerge as an adult, there are a lot more pressures put on you to focus on your career because you're starting to reach the point where you're responsible for sustaining yourself and potentially your family. That added pressure oftentimes makes it feel silly to invest time into things that aren't conducive to actual obligations or career responsibilities. Whenever I was a lot younger, there were so many talents that I wanted to have and hobbies that I imagined myself picking up, and I just never did them when I had the freedom to. That was a result of conditioning myself to be lazy and helpless. And I finally started doing some of these things, and I've gotten enjoyment out of them, but I also feel this lingering sense of guilt picking up new things at this age that are probably not likely to make me a lot of money in the future. For example, I always wanted to learn piano, and I have a keyboard that had just been sitting in my room for years. I just never had the motivation to just spend 30 minutes a day practicing. I actually just recently started consistently practicing whenever I turned 19. At first, it was exciting for me, and it still is exciting learning a new skill and going on a new journey. But there was one time when I was watching a show, and in the show there was a 5-year-old who was playing piano at their talent show. That really mean part of my brain started telling me there are 5-year-olds who know how to do this, and you are just now learning, even though you had the chance to learn when you were a child. And another example of this is reading books. Whenever I was a younger teenager, I wanted to be somebody who was able to leisurely read books. But a lot of the time, whenever I would try to read, it would just be really hard for me to even get through a single book, and I even went years without finishing a single book. Now I've reached the point where I'm able to read multiple books a month, and I don't really feel as accomplished about that as I thought I would have been years ago. I actually feel unproductive and lazy whenever I spend time reading books solely for enjoyment rather than reading books that I'm required to read, or books where there's some kind of money-making technique, or books that would actually be conducive to a career in the future. And of course, there's nothing wrong with picking up new hobbies or being a beginner at any age, but I just noticed for me, there's always this lingering sense of feeling like I'm wasting my time when I'm doing these things, knowing that I'm probably not going to make a lot of money from them. When you get older, there's just more pressure put on you when it comes to what you choose to invest a lot of time in, because finances and sustaining yourself are constantly at the forefront of your mind, and making a lot of money is constantly at the forefront of your mind. It seems that adults experience a lot of distress that stems from the concept of careers, whether it's feeling unfulfilled with their career, being unsure about their career, feeling insecure about the career that they're in. If they've already established a career, the constant competitiveness within the career that they're in, it just seems like there's so much distress around the ideas of careers. Everything is just constantly career, career, career. The idea of having a career for the majority of people is just a means of self-preservation. I don't think the majority of people are passionate about their careers. That's really difficult whenever your life in a way revolves around your career. I start to feel very awkward whenever somebody asks, oh, so what are you doing? What are you studying? What do you want to do? What are you pursuing? Who do you want to work for? Or any other similarly sounding question that I just don't have the answer to, and I don't know if I ever will have the answer to that. There is no career, especially not one that seems super lucrative, that I have a deep passion for or feel undeniably called to pursue. There's some doubts on if I'm even going to have a career, to be honest, with how unstable the job market is, with how pretentious the job market is, with how hard it is to get a job. And then, of course, people will say, you don't want to work for somebody, start your own business, be an entrepreneur. If I were to start a business, what business idea would I even have? And also, that path does not work out for the majority of people who want to go down it to begin with. I'm entering my 20s. I'm going to have to figure out my career eventually. I'm going to have to establish some kind of direction. My career probably isn't going to be something that I'm passionate about. Lately, I've also been thinking about a lot of the additional heartache that seems to become more inevitable as you grow older. It seems that as your life progresses, you become more susceptible to experiencing more of these traumatic life events, mainly in the realm of death and loss. The majority of people deep enough into their adulthood can relate to having people that they've known and people that have been in their lives for a while just not being there anymore. It's bizarre to think with every year, the likelihood goes up of you experiencing loss and heartache. In life, you deal with all this heartache and then you're done. You're dead and that's it. This took a really dark turn. But especially in the years where your life is starting to dwindle down, all of that suffering just becomes more inevitable. And again, all of it ultimately culminates in you dying. That's the resolution to it all. Whenever you're younger, it seems like life is just full of so much promising possibilities. Whenever you reach those latter years of your life, seems like all of that promise that life offered whenever you were younger just starts to vanish. Life just consists of people that you knew just withering away, knowing that your life is slowly withering away. That sounds really depressing. I could be saying that just because I haven't really lived as much life as a lot of people. It's just really bizarre to think that if I live long enough, my entire world is going to be completely different. The world that I'm used to, the world as I know it, is going to look completely different. I'm not sure what exactly the world is even going to be like, but I know that the way that the world is for me right now is going to be just a distant memory. There's so much change whenever you're entering adulthood. When I would think about these changes when I was younger, I acknowledged they were going to be there, but I always brushed them off thinking they would be gradual and I would have more time to soak in the normalcy of what my life looked like without abruptly being faced with those changes. And the next thing I knew, everything started changing. I was being faced with these things and forced to acknowledge them as more than just distant realities that I wouldn't have to worry about. I had to face that soon enough. I was going to see and know what my life looked like as an adult. This unwillingness to welcome these new changes does partly stem from wondering what my life would have been like if I would have soaked in my younger years more. Would I have been more receptive to a lot of these changes if I would have soaked in my life more? But I also know that it's very typical to think and feel this way. A lot of the feelings that I've had towards adulthood have been so up and down. Every day I feel multiple bouts of dread and hope. And yes, oftentimes I do miss what my life used to be like. But I also remember life has gotten better for me in a lot of ways. I have more discipline. I have more confidence. I have a more positive attitude. Whenever I observe positive changes that I've made, it's easy to continue dwelling on those what ifs. What if I would have made these changes sooner? I could have been a lot more assured with my life now, and I still believe that to be true. But when reframing my perspective, I also am able to recognize that making bad decisions, regretting them, and then learning from them is just a part of the human experience. All of the positive and negative experiences that you face whenever you're younger have the ability to shape you into a better adult. I wanted to end this video on a positive note and discuss some of the things that I plan to do to at least try to give myself a better life in the future. The first thing that I'm doing is being more solution oriented. That means there's no room for complaining and not doing anything about whatever it is that I have an issue with. Of course, there's always a time and place for wallowing. There's always a time and place for feeling those negative emotions. I'm not trying to make this a toxic positive, being happy happy all the time, pushing through everything, but there's going to be conflict in life. There's going to be things that are going to make me feel sad, frustrated, and I don't want to continue being somebody who completely surrenders to these things. If there's something that I can do to change a situation that I'm not happy with, no matter how hard it is, I'm going to gravitate towards finding a solution to that situation instead of just wallowing constantly. The next thing that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to prioritize joy and peace. There are so many things that are meant to suck the joy out of you and rob you of your peace, especially when you're a teen, especially when you're an adult. These things are going to be inevitable, but I want to prioritize doing things that are actually going to give me lasting joy and living the most meaningful life that I possibly can. There shouldn't be any guilt or shame associated with doing things to want to enjoy my finances and making money. That's always going to be something that I have to think about. But I don't want to be an adult that's just completely unamused with their life. I don't want to be somebody who doesn't have any joy and excitement. I think there's joy and excitement in so many different places. I'm working on taking the initiative to actually find what that looks like for me. And the last thing that I'm going to do is try to soak in the moment, even if I'm not happy with what the moment is at that point. It's very natural for people to cling to the past. I was having a lot of these negative feelings even whenever I was 17. I was feeling like my life was ending, reminiscing on the past and wishing that I could have done things differently. Now I'm 19, and now being 17 is considered the past for me. Being 17 is considered old times for me. At 19, I know how I feel about going into adulthood. I have all these doubts about going into adulthood, but when I'm 38, if I live to be that long, hopefully I do, but when I live to be 37 and 38, 19 years old is going to be a part of my early life, and I think I am going to be looking back on my life at 19 and regretting not soaking in where I'm at, even if I'm not completely happy with how my life is, even if I have all of these negative feelings. Eventually I'm going to be in my 30s and I'm going to look at 19 and think of myself as so young. Every moment that you're in is going to be the past eventually, and I think you are going to cling to every moment in your life. At least, I mean, I can't speak for other people, but I know for me, even moments where I was going through something or times in life where I wasn't happy, look back at them and I reminisce on those times. Even if you're 56, when you turn 70, 56 is going to be the past for you. If you're in your 60s and you make it to being 90 years old, 60s is going to be the past for you. Every single moment is going to be the past for you, and you're always going to be looking at every single moment whenever those moments aren't there anymore, because once those moments are gone, you can't relive them really. Whenever I'm yearning for the past, which is the present for me right now, I want to give myself something meaningful to look back on. I don't want to look back on more years of my life with regret. So that just means soaking in moments, like I said before, in a way that's meaningful to me, not necessarily doing all of these trademark things, for lack of a better word, that people say you should do, or things that people say you're going to regret it if you don't do this. I have to think about, what do I want to do? What do I want out of my life? What can I do to give myself the most meaningful life now? A life that I can look back on and not feel like I wasted it. So that's going to be it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you feel a similar way to me, if you felt a similar way to me, please let me know in the comments down below. And I will see you guys super soon. Peace.